The door slammed with a force that shook the walls of our San Francisco apartment, leaving me standing there in stunned silence. "I can't believe you betrayed me like this, William," Daniel had shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of anger and pain that cut deeper than any knife. I stared at the closed door for what felt like hours, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The accusation hung in the air like smoke I couldn't clear. Daniel had found old screenshots on my laptop, messages from 3 years ago that looked damning if you didn't know the full story. He thought I had been cheating with my college roommate, Alex, the entire time we were building our life together. I tried to explain, but the hurt in his eyes shut me down before I could finish a sentence. Now the apartment felt too big, too quiet. I sank onto the couch, the same gray sectional we picked out together at IKEA on our second date, and pulled out my old cracked phone from the drawer. It was the backup I kept for nostalgia, the one I hadn't touched since we moved in together. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the drafts folder, searching for anything that could prove I was innocent. That's when I saw it, the unsent message dated exactly 3 years ago today. My thumb hovered over the screen. The message was addressed to Daniel, not Alex. It read, "I know you're scared about meeting my parents next weekend. I'm scared too. But I choose you. Every single day I choose you. No matter what they say, no matter how hard it gets, you're my home. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone." I never sent it. I had written it the night before our first big family dinner, then chickened out because I was terrified he'd think I was moving too fast. Tears blurred the screen. How had I forgotten this? And how had those other messages, innocent late-night study texts with Alex, been twisted into proof of betrayal? Daniel had left without giving me a chance to show him the truth. I grabbed my keys and ran out into the cool night air, the city lights of the Castro district blurring past me as I headed toward the bar where I knew he would be. The walk gave me time to think. Our story hadn't started with betrayal. It began in a rainy lecture hall at UC Berkeley during my junior year. I was William Hayes, the closeted kid from a conservative Ohio family who had moved west for college hoping distance would make coming out easier. Daniel Rivera was the confident literature major with the easy smile and the habit of quoting poetry in everyday conversation. He sat 2 rows ahead of me in American Lit, and one Tuesday he turned around and asked if I had notes from the previous class. That simple question turned into coffee after class, then late-night study sessions, then the night he kissed me under the campanile at midnight while the bells rang above us. I had never felt so seen. For the first time, loving another man didn't feel like a secret I had to hide. It felt like coming home. But secrets have a way of following you. My parents still sent Christmas cards addressed only to William and never asked about my roommate. Daniel's mother in Texas called every Sunday and always ended with, "When are you bringing a nice girl home, Mijo?" We built our life anyway. After graduation, we both stayed in San Francisco. I landed a job at a nonprofit helping LGBTQ youth, and Daniel taught English at a private high school. We adopted a rescue dog named Milo and argued over whose turn it was to walk him. On weekends, we hiked Marin Headlands and talked about the future, maybe a house in the suburbs someday, maybe kids through surrogacy. Felt solid. Until tonight. By the time I reached the cafe, my favorite spot in the Castro, my shirt was damp with sweat despite the chill. I spotted Daniel at the bar, nursing a whiskey neat, his shoulders hunched the way they did when he was trying not to cry. I approached slowly, phone clutched in my hand like a shield. "Daniel," I said softly. He turned, eyes red-rimmed, and the pain there almost made me turn back. "I found something. Please, just look." He didn't move. The bartender, an old friend named Marcus, gave me a sympathetic nod but stayed out of it. I slid onto the stool beside him and opened the draft. "Read it. Please." Daniel's eyes scanned the screen. I watched his expression shift from anger to confusion to something raw and unguarded. His hand shook as he set the phone down. "You wrote this the night before we met my mom?" I nodded. "I never sent it because I was scared. Scared you'd think I was rushing things. But every word was true then, and it's still true now. Those messages with Alex were nothing. He was helping me study for finals. I swear on everything we've built. The silence stretched. Around us the bar hummed with laughter and music, but in our small corner the world had narrowed to just the two of us. Daniel finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. I was so sure. The screenshots looked exactly like the ones my ex used to send me before he cheated. I let my past poison us. I reached for his hand. He let me take it. We both have ghosts. Mine is the fear my family will never accept us. Yours is betrayal. But we don't have to let them win. That night we walked home together, Milo greeting us at the door with happy barks. We didn't fix everything. Daniel still needed time to process, but the unsent message had cracked the door open. Little did I know it was only the beginning of truths that would test us far more than any accusation ever could. The next morning sunlight streamed through our bedroom windows, painting stripes across the rumpled sheets. Daniel was already up, standing at the kitchen counter stirring coffee with the same methodical slowness he used when he was thinking hard. I padded in barefoot, still processing the fragile truce we had reached at the bar. "Morning," I said, voice rough from lack of sleep. He handed me a mug without meeting my eyes. The silence wasn't angry anymore, just heavy. "I called in sick to school," he admitted. "Couldn't face explaining why my eyes are puffy." I set the mug down and wrapped my arms around him from behind. He leaned back into me, and for a moment the world felt right again. "We need to talk about more than last night," I said gently. The message opened a door, but we've both been carrying things we never said out loud. He turned to face me. "Like what?" "Like how I still flinch every time my phone buzzes with a call from Ohio. My dad's last email said, 'Hope you're not wasting your degree on those activist jobs.' He still won't say your name." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And I never told you how much it hurts when my sister posts family photos without me in them. She says it's complicated for her kids." I smile and like the posts anyway. We spent the morning on the couch, Milo curled between us like a furry referee. I told him about the night I almost came out to my parents during Thanksgiving break my sophomore year. I had printed out articles about successful gay men in business, rehearsed the speech in the mirror. Then my father made a casual joke about those people at his country club, and the words died in my throat. I drove back to California the next day and never tried again. Daniel shared his own scars, the ex-boyfriend in college who used him as an experiment and then went back to his girlfriend, posting engagement photos 2 months later. "That's why the screenshots hit so hard," he said. History repeating. By afternoon we were exhausted but closer. We decided to take a walk through Dolores Park. The city spread out below us in a patchwork of rooftops and fog. Hand in hand, we looked like any other couple enjoying the sunshine. No one stared. In San Francisco, that was its own kind of victory. But peace never lasts when families are involved. My phone rang as we headed home. "Mom." I almost let it go to voicemail, but Daniel squeezed my hand and mouthed, "You've got this." "Hi, honey," Mom said, her voice bright in that practiced way. "Your father and I are coming to San Francisco next month for a conference. We thought we'd stay with you a few days. It's been too long." My stomach dropped. They had never visited us together. Separate trips, always claiming work conflicts, but we both knew the truth. "That sounds great," I lied. "Daniel will be thrilled." The pause on her end was tiny but deafening. "We're looking forward to seeing your place. Is the guest room ready?" After I hung up, Daniel didn't need to ask. He saw it in my face. "They're coming," I said. "And they still think the guest room is for you." That evening we cooked pasta together, the familiar rhythm of chopping and stirring soothing some of the panic. Daniel opened a bottle of the cheap red we bought on our first anniversary. "We've faced worse," he reminded me. "Remember when my mom visited and insisted on taking us to church? We survived." I laughed despite everything. "Yeah. And you sang the hymns louder than anyone just to make her happy." But as we ate, the unsent message sat between us like a third presence. Daniel kept glancing at my phone on the counter. Finally he asked, "Why didn't you send it?" I set my fork down. Because sending it would have made it real. And if you didn't feel the same, I didn't think I could survive that rejection. So I kept it safe in drafts where it couldn't hurt me. He reached across the table. I would have sent it back with about 1,000 heart emojis. That night we made love for the first time since the fight, slow, careful, full of whispered apologies and promises. It wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about choosing each other again. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. We deep-cleaned the apartment, bought a proper air mattress for the guest room, and practiced polite conversation topics that avoided anything remotely political or personal. Daniel's teaching schedule kept him busy, but every evening he came home with small gifts. A new plant for the windowsill, my favorite Thai takeout. Small acts that said we were still building. Then the email arrived. It was from Alex, my old roommate. The subject line read, "Hey man, long time. Need to talk." I almost deleted it unread. But something made me open it. "William, I heard through the grapevine you and Daniel are having some trust issues. I just wanted to clear the air." Those study sessions were exactly that, studying. Nothing more. If my messages caused problems, I'm sorry. Also, I came out last year. Married now to a great guy named Jordan. Life's funny, right? Anyway, hope you two are good. I showed Daniel immediately. He read it twice, then pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. "I believe you," he whispered. "I should have believed you from the start." Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. Because attached to Alex's email was a forwarded thread from 3 years ago. Messages between him and Daniel that I had never seen. Messages where Daniel had asked Alex to keep an eye on me because he was worried I was pulling away. The ground shifted again. Daniel's face went pale as I scrolled further down the forwarded thread. "I don't understand," he said, voice small. "I never asked Alex to spy on you." But the timestamps matched perfectly, right after I had written my unsent message. Daniel had been anxious about meeting my parents and had reached out to my closest friend for advice. Alex, being Alex, had taken it too far and started reporting back. None of the messages were romantic, but they painted a picture of doubt. "I was scared," Daniel admitted, sinking onto the couch. "You got so quiet after you wrote that draft. I thought maybe you regretted us." The irony hit like a truck. My unsent words of love had made him insecure enough to confide in the wrong person, which later gave him evidence of my betrayal. We had accidentally built a house of cards on miscommunication. That night we stayed up until dawn dissecting every misunderstanding we could remember. The time I canceled our anniversary dinner because of a work crisis and he thought I was losing interest. The time he went to a conference in LA and didn't text for 12 hours because his phone died, and I spiraled thinking he was with someone else. Each revelation peeled back another layer of fear we had both been carrying. By sunrise, we were raw but strangely lighter. We almost lost each other over things we never said. I told him as we watched the city wake up from our balcony. He nodded. "No more drafts. No more assumptions. From now on we speak." The decision felt like a turning point, but life had other plans. 2 days later, my parents' flight landed. I picked them up at SFO while Daniel stayed home to finish lesson plans. Mom hugged me tight at baggage claim. Dad gave me the usual firm handshake and a once-over that made me feel 16 again. The drive home was filled with small talk about weather and traffic. When we pulled up to the apartment building, Dad raised an eyebrow at the rainbow flag on the balcony across the street. "Interesting neighborhood," he muttered. Inside, Daniel had set the table with my mother's favorite flowers and cooked her famous pot roast recipe from the family cookbook I had secretly sent him. Mom beamed. Dad remained polite but distant, asking Daniel about his teaching job in a tone that suggested he was interviewing a candidate rather than his son's partner. That first dinner went better than expected until Mom asked the question we had dreaded. "So, boys, any plans for the future? Marriage? Kids?" Daniel and I exchanged a glance. We had talked about it privately, civil union first, maybe adoption later, but saying it out loud to my parents felt like stepping off a cliff. "We're taking it one day at a time," I said carefully. Dad set his fork down. One day at a time is fine for dating. But you're 30 now, William. Life choices have consequences. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Daniel's hand found mine under the table. I squeezed back hard. Later, after my parents retired to the guest room, Daniel and I stood on the balcony sharing a single glass of wine. Your dad hates me, he said quietly. He doesn't know you, I replied. He doesn't know us. The next morning Mom cornered me in the kitchen while Dad was in the shower. He's a good man, honey. I can see how much he loves you. But your father, he's worried about what people back home will say. The church, the neighbors. I wanted to scream that their church and neighbors had nothing to do with my happiness. Instead, I hugged her. I love him, Mom. That's all that matters. The visit stretched into a week of careful politeness masking deeper tension. Dad took me golfing one afternoon, his way of bonding, and spent 9 holes talking about traditional values without ever looking at me. I came home drained. Daniel listened without judgment, then suggested we all go to the Golden Gate Bridge for photos. Neutral territory. On the bridge, wind whipping around us, Dad surprised everyone by asking Daniel to take a picture of him and Mom. Then he turned to me. Get in the shot, son. It was the first time in years he had called me that without sounding disappointed. Small but something. That night Daniel and I lay in bed listening to my parents' soft voices through the wall. They were arguing, not loudly, but enough that we caught fragments. They seem happy, Mom said. Let them be. Dad's reply was muffled but firm. The next day my parents flew home. At the airport Dad shook Daniel's hand longer than necessary. Take care of my boy, he said gruffly. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. Progress measured in millimeters. We celebrated that night with takeout and bad reality TV, laughing until our sides hurt. For the first time in weeks the apartment felt like ours again. But the universe wasn't done testing us. The following Monday Daniel received a certified letter from his estranged father in Texas. The man who had kicked him out at 17 for being gay now wanted to reconnect. He was dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And he wanted to see his son. Daniel stared at the letter for a long time. I don't know if I can, he whispered. He told me I was going to hell. I held him while he cried. The deep, wrenching sobs of a boy who had never stopped hoping his father would love him anyway. The decision to fly to Texas took 3 days of pacing and long conversations. Daniel's mother begged him to go. His sister sent photos of their father in the hospital, frail and hooked up to machines. I offered to come with him, but Daniel shook his head. This is something I have to face alone. But knowing you're here waiting makes it possible. I drove him to the airport at dawn, the city still sleeping around us. At security he kissed me so fiercely security guards looked away. I'll call every night, he promised. No more unsent messages. The apartment felt cavernous without him. I threw myself into work, staying late at the youth center helping teenagers navigate their own coming-out stories. Their courage reminded me why I did this job. One kid, a 16-year-old named Jamie, told me his parents had threatened to kick him out. I gave him the shelter list and my personal cell. You're not alone, I said, echoing words Daniel had once said to me. Nights were harder. I kept the unsent message open on my phone like a talisman, rereading it when loneliness crept in. Daniel's calls came like clockwork. Short updates at first, then longer ones filled with pain. His father had apologized in broken sentences. I was wrong, Mijo. I was scared of what the world would do to you. The words Daniel had waited decades to hear now arrived too late. On the 4th night, Daniel's voice cracked over the phone. He asked if I was happy. I told him about you. He cried, William. My father cried. I wanted to reach through the line and hold him. Instead, I said the only thing I could. Come home when you're ready. I'll be here. While Daniel was gone, my own past surfaced unexpectedly. Alex invited me to his wedding in Oakland. Jordan, his husband, was a gentle giant who greeted me with a bear hug. Seeing Alex so settled and proud cracked something open inside me. We spent the reception talking about old times, laughing over failed exams and terrible dorm food. Alex apologized again for the messages. "I thought I was helping," he said. "Turns out I just stirred the pot." I forgave him completely. Life was too short for old grudges. The wedding gave me courage. On the flight back, I drafted a new message, this one I would send. It was to my parents. I wrote about the years of silence, the way their careful avoidance had chipped away at me, and how Daniel had taught me what real family looked like. I ended with, "I love you both, but I need you to love all of me, including the man I chose to build my life with. No more guest rooms." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Daniel returned 5 days later, thinner and quieter but carrying a strange peace. We met at the airport arrivals gate like a scene from every romantic movie. He dropped his bag and walked straight into my arms. "I forgave him," he said against my shoulder. "Not for him. For me." That night we sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint the city gold. Milo lay at our feet. Daniel pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "It's not a proposal," he said quickly, laughing at my expression. "Not yet. It's a promise ring. Titanium, because we're both stubborn as hell." Inside were 2 simple bands engraved with our initials and the date of the unsent message. I slipped mine on, then his. "No more drafts," I whispered. The next morning my phone buzzed with a reply from Mom. "Your father and I read your message. We're coming back next month. This time the guest room is for us. We want to meet Daniel properly as family." Dad had added a single line, "Proud of you, son." Tears blurred the screen. Daniel read over my shoulder and pulled me close. "See? Truth finds its way." But peace in our world was fragile. 2 weeks later the youth center faced funding cuts. My job was on the line. At the same time Daniel's school board started questioning the books he taught, specifically the ones with LGBTQ characters. Parents complained. Suddenly our private life was public ammunition. We attended the board meeting together, hands linked openly in the front row. Daniel spoke eloquently about representation. I spoke about the kids who needed safe spaces. The room was divided, some cheered, others glared. The vote was close, but the book stayed. My job survived with reduced hours. Small victories. Through it all we leaned on each other. Late nights turned into early mornings where we talked about everything and nothing. Daniel started writing poetry again, something he hadn't done since college. One poem he left on the fridge was titled Unsent. It ended with the line, "Some messages wait until we're brave enough to live them." I framed it. The months that followed felt like we were rebuilding on stronger foundations. My parents' second visit was different. Dad helped Daniel grill steaks on the balcony while Mom and I baked her famous apple pie. They asked real questions about our life, our friends, our plans. No more careful sidestepping. When they left, Dad hugged Daniel. Actually hugged him. I stood in the doorway watching and realized healing wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet and awkward and still miraculous. Work stabilized. The youth center received an anonymous donation large enough to keep all programs running. I suspected Daniel's mother had something to do with it. She had started following the center's social media after his trip to Texas, but he just smiled and denied everything. We started volunteering together on weekends, mentoring young gay teens at a summer camp in the Redwoods. Watching those kids discover their voices reminded us why the fight mattered. One boy, 15-year-old Marcus, reminded me so much of myself at that age that I stayed late one night talking with him under the stars. "It gets better," I told him. "Not perfect, but better. And you don't have to do it alone." Daniel waited for me by the campfire, 2 mugs of hot chocolate in hand. "You're good at this," he said softly. "Being someone's safe place." I kissed him right there in front of the crackling fire and sleeping cabins. No hiding. No fear. Fall arrived with cooler nights and the first hints of holiday planning. We decided to host Thanksgiving for both families. His mother flying in from Texas, my parents driving from Ohio. The apartment would be crowded, the table too small, but it felt right. Preparations turned chaotic in the best way. Daniel's mother arrived first, bearing homemade tamales and a fierce hug for me. "You make my son happy," she whispered in my ear. "That's enough for me." My parents arrived the next day. The initial awkwardness melted faster than expected when Mom bonded with Daniel's mother over recipes, and Dad discovered they both loved old Western movies. By evening, the four of them were laughing in the kitchen like old friends. Thanksgiving dinner was loud and messy and perfect. Turkey and tamales side by side, toasts that made us cry, Milo begging under the table. At one point, Daniel's mother raised her glass. "To family, the one we're born into and the one we choose." Everyone drank to that. Later, when the dishes were done and everyone had retired, Daniel and I slipped out to the balcony. The city lights twinkled below us like stars brought down to earth. He pulled me close, resting his chin on my shoulder. "I have something to ask you," he said. His voice trembled just slightly. From his pocket he took the same velvet box from months ago, but this time when he opened it there were 2 new rings, simple platinum bands with a single diamond each. "William Hayes, will you marry me? Not because we survived the hard stuff, but because I want to keep surviving it with you. Every unsent message, every misunderstanding, every victory. I want all of it." Tears spilled down my face before I could stop them. "Yes," I whispered. 1,000 times yes. We kissed under the San Francisco sky while inside our families slept, unaware that the next chapter had just begun. The wedding planning started immediately. Small and intimate, we decided close friends, immediate family, the youth center kids who wanted to come. We chose a date in June, the anniversary of our first kiss under the campanile. Venue: a small vineyard in Napa that overlooked rolling hills and had a rainbow flag flying year-round. But happiness always seems to invite new tests. 2 months before the wedding, Daniel received a job offer in New York, a dream position at a prestigious private school with double the salary and benefits. It would mean leaving everything we had built in California. Leaving the youth center, our apartment, our friends. We stayed up all night talking about it. "I won't go if you don't want to," he said. "This is our home." I thought about the unsent message that had started everything. How fear had almost cost us our future once. "We choose each other," I reminded him. "If New York is where your dream is, we go together. We'll build a new home." The decision wasn't easy. I applied for transfer positions with similar nonprofits in New York and received 2 offers within weeks. The universe, it seemed, was clearing the path. Saying goodbye to San Francisco was bittersweet. We walked Milo one last time through Dolores Park, ate our favorite burritos in the Mission, danced at the cafe until closing. Friends threw us a farewell party that lasted until sunrise. Marcus from the youth center gave me a handmade card that read, "Thank you for showing me it's okay to be me." I cried reading it. On moving day, the apartment stood empty except for the framed poem still on the fridge. Daniel carefully packed it in his carry-on. "This comes with us," he said. The flight to New York felt like the beginning of another chapter. As the plane climbed above the clouds, Daniel took my hand. "No more drafts," he whispered. "No more drafts," I agreed. New York greeted us with snow and chaos and an energy that felt both terrifying and electric. Our new apartment in Brooklyn was smaller but had a rooftop view of the Manhattan skyline. We spent the first month unpacking boxes and learning subway routes, laughing when we got lost and celebrating when we didn't. Daniel started his new job with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. I began work at a larger LGBTQ youth organization in Manhattan, the scale both daunting and inspiring. Winter turned to spring. Wedding planning shifted into high gear from 3,000 miles away. Video calls with our mothers became weekly events filled with fabric swatches and seating charts. My parents surprised us by offering to host the rehearsal dinner in a small restaurant near the vineyard. Daniel's mother insisted on making her famous tres leches cake for the reception. In April, we flew back for final fittings and a quiet weekend in San Francisco. Walking through the Castro again felt like visiting an old friend. We stopped at the exact spot where I had first shown him the unsent message years earlier. Daniel pulled out his phone and read the words aloud from memory. I choose you. Every single day. I kissed him right there on the sidewalk while strangers smiled and kept walking. The week before the wedding we stayed at a bed and breakfast near the vineyard. Our families arrived one by one, turning the place into a joyful chaos of laughter and last-minute adjustments. The night before the ceremony, Daniel and I sat on the porch swing under string lights, Milo snoring at our feet. He had flown first class for the occasion. Any regrets? I asked softly. Only that we waited so long to send the important messages, he answered. But we got here anyway. The wedding day dawned bright and warm. The vineyard's garden bloomed with wildflowers and rainbow ribbons. Our friends filled the white folding chairs. Jamie and Marcus from the youth center sat in the front row wearing matching ties. Alex and Jordan flew in from California. I walked down the aisle first, my father beside me, his hand steady on my arm. He whispered, "I'm proud of the man you've become," and this time I knew he meant every word. Daniel waited under the arbor, looking devastating in his navy suit. When our eyes met, the rest of the world faded. His mother stood beside him, tears already flowing. The ceremony was simple. We read our own vows. Mine included the full text of the unsent message I had finally sent years ago. Daniel's vow was a poem he had written just for today, ending with the line, "You are my home, my truth, my forever choice." When the officiant pronounced us married, the cheers that rose could have been heard across the valley. We kissed under a shower of rose petals while cameras flashed and Milo barked happily from the front row. The reception spilled into the evening with dancing under the stars. My father danced with Daniel's mother. My mother slow danced with me and whispered, "Your happiness looks so good on you." Later, as the music slowed, Daniel pulled me onto the dance floor for our first dance as husbands. The song was the one that had played the night we met. Somewhere only we know. We swayed together, foreheads touching. "I love you," I said. "I love you more than all the unsent messages in the world," he replied. Life after the wedding settled into a beautiful rhythm. We bought a small house in Brooklyn with a backyard for Milo and future foster dogs. Daniel published his first poetry collection, dedicated to the man who taught me to send every important message. I rose to program director at the youth center, helping launch a national scholarship for LGBTQ students. Some days were still hard. Prejudice didn't vanish just because we had rings on our fingers. But we faced it together, stronger, wiser, and unafraid to speak. Years later, on our 10th anniversary, we returned to San Francisco for a weekend. We stood once more at the spot where everything had almost ended. I pulled out my phone and opened a new draft. This time I typed only 3 words and hit send immediately. "I still choose you." Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He read the message, smiled, and kissed me right there in the Castro as the city lights came on around us. Some messages wait. Others change everything the moment they're finally sent. True or false? The deepest betrayals are always caused by the people we love most.